Coming up on this week's show, Kim Fielding is here as part of the 2017 GRL Blog Tour, and Brandilyn has a summertime audiobook recommendation.
Welcome to the Big Gay Fiction Podcast, the show for readers and writers of gay romance fiction. If you can read it, write it, watch it, or listen to it, these two guys are going to talk about it. Now, here are your hosts, Jeff Adams and Will Knaus.
Welcome to episode 91 of Jeff and Will's Big Gay Fiction Podcast. I'm Jeff from JeffAdamsWrites.com.
And I'm Will from WillKnaus.com. This week's episode is sponsored in part by listeners just like you. We'll have more information on how you can help support this show in just a few moments. How long have I been saying that?
Probably like 26 or 27 weeks now, because we started it in January.
That's true. It's only taken me half a year, and I have finally memorized that 2-sentence spiel.
And he used to act in community theater and learn whole scripts.
Congratulations to me.
Well
anyway,
done.
Okay. Welcome home.
Yes, welcome home. We got back on Tuesday this week.
Had a lovely trip abroad.
Abroad. I don't think they count the other coast as abroad.
I count it.
Simply by plane time?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yes, it was a good trip. We'll be talking about that a bunch more coming up in a bit.
Yeah.
So there was ultra awesome good news while we were away. Schooled, which is the second book in the Codename Winger series, went under contract at Harmony Inc. I got that email just as we landed in New York on Thursday afternoon, so that was kind of cool to see that drop right into the inbox.
Mm-hmm.
That will come out targeting a spring 2018 release. And of course, book 1, called Tracker Hacker, will be out in October of this year. Cool. Yay. You're supposed to say yay or something.
Yay. I am very proud of you. I'm very glad.
It's almost old news for us now, because it happened like a week ago.
Yeah.
The other thing that happened while we were on break from recording was I did an appearance on the Out Entrepreneur podcast, which is hosted by Rhodes Perry. I met Rhodes doing the Cycle for the Cause ride, the Northeast AIDS ride, about 2 or 3 years ago, and got to know him and understand what he does. He's a consultant who can work with companies to make sure that they're including their LGBT employees in a good and positive fashion. He also works with out entrepreneurs so that they know they need to be their authentic selves when operating in the workplace. And he invited me on to talk about kind of my role as an author entrepreneur, which we kind of expanded to become the creative entrepreneur, to kind of widen the palette a little bit. I know you listened to the show and you said I kind of did okay, because I was a little worried that I was kind of being just babbling off at the mouth. So
I thought it was a very good episode. You have nothing to worry about.
Very good. If you want to hear that appearance, there's a link in the show notes, or you can just go to outentrepreneur.com and check out episode 26. I really like his podcast. I listen to it a lot because he brings on people who, even though most of them don't talk about author and writing and creative, there's a little something to pick up in these entrepreneurial podcasts that help out with what we do as creative entrepreneurs ourselves.
Cool. Awesome. So, since this is our first time back recording in a while, we have some patrons to thank.
Woohoo!
A very big thank you to our newest patrons, Terry and Maureen.
Welcome.
Now, you can help support the Big Gay Fiction Podcast with a monthly pledge through Patreon. For as little as 25 cents an episode, your pledge helps pay the costs of producing and distributing this podcast. Now, for those fans who pledge at our silver and gold levels, you'll have the exclusive opportunity to ask questions of our upcoming guests. And you can get details on how to become a patron at patreon.com/Big Gay Fiction Podcast. That's Patreon/Big Gay Fiction Podcast.
Well done. So you've done that for 6 months now, too. And you've got it down there to a science now.
Pretty much.
So we're excited to welcome Kim Fielding to the podcast. Kim is our first person to be on the show as part of the 2017 GRL Blog Tour, which will be running until October, the week that GRL happens, which I believe was the week of October 16th. So we welcome Kim. She's going to talk to us about her summer plans, her love of audiobooks, both having her books turned into audiobooks and actually listening to them herself. Plus, she's got a giveaway for you guys, too. She's giving away an audiobook as well as an ebook, so let's listen to that. I'm excited to welcome Kim Fielding to the podcast as part of the 2017 GRL Blog Tour. Kim is the best-selling author of numerous romance novels, novellas, and short stories. Like Kim herself, her work is eclectic, spanning genres such as contemporary, fantasy, paranormal, and historical. Her stories are set in alternate worlds, in 15th century Bosnia, and in modern-day Oregon. Her heroes are hipster architect werewolves, housekeepers, maimed giants, and conflicted grad students. They're usually flawed. They often encounter terrible obstacles, but they always find love, which is always, of course, awesome. Welcome, Kim.
Thank you for having me. It's a delight.
Yeah, we're excited to kick off the GRL Blog Tour with you. At least our part of it, anyway. So tell us, what have you been up to this summer?
Well, summer's been busy so far. Today, I submitted my 21st novel to the publisher, so that was
congrats.
That was exciting. Yeah, so that's exciting. But the rest of June, I was doing a road trip. My older daughter graduated from high school, and so I thought it would be a good time to kind of drag her on the road. So we drove from California to Nebraska, which she was very excited about it. 17 years old. Nebraska is where you want to go. So we drove to Nebraska and we saw Carhenge and it was very exciting. And then we went up to the Black Hills in South Dakota and came back across Montana, went to Oregon and came back down to California. And so that's a little over almost 4,500 miles.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are you going to get a book out of that trip?
I'm sure. I've already got a lot of ideas. Yeah.
Awesome. Because I'm sure, I think you probably went through some very eclectic spaces between all those miles.
We stayed at some really fun little motels in places like Wyoming and South Dakota, and just saw a lot of empty space, a lot of sagebrush, a whole lot of antelope, so it was a lot of fun.
Nice. Now, with your self-published books, you tend to give your royalties to charity. Tell us how that got started and what charity you support.
Well, the charity that I primarily support is Doctors Without Borders, just because they do such... it's hard to think of a charity that's doing more meaningful, more needed work, and they're not political. Those people they're risking their lives, which I'm not a doctor. I can't do that. So it's kind of my way of trying to do that. And so I started it several years ago when I first self-published before I even had other publishers, and it's just it's a way for me to give back, and it doesn't. Sometimes I can't give as much as I might want out of my paycheck. So this way I can do it. It gives me a little extra incentive sometimes to do some self-publishing. And I'm able to give them a really nice hefty check at the end of the year.
That's awesome. What's kind of your ratio of self-published to publisher these days?
I would say probably about 90% of what I do is publisher rather than self-published. And self-published I tend to do shorter pieces. I have some older pieces that I've done. I have some things that are available for free as novellas, but I've self-published the audiobooks, and those I also donate those proceeds to. So.
Mm-hmm. Now, speaking of audio, you've got about a dozen audiobooks out there. What attracts that to you as a format for your work?
I'm a really big fan of audiobooks. I listen to them a lot. I like to walk. It's my primary exercise. And so the thing that gets me out the door is audiobooks. And, if I'm listening to a really great audiobook, it'll often keep me walking an extra couple of blocks, like if I'm at a really good part or something like that. So that's the big part is I guess it's kind of a vanity. I love listening to them, and there's nothing more fun than listening to my own words being read. And there are some amazingly talented voice actors out there. So I guess the main thing is that I'm a fan, but I think also audiobooks can reach a wider audience, people who don't read in print at all for various reasons, people who like to listen while they're commuting, that kind of thing. And it's a different experience than reading on paper too.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I would certainly agree with that, because I've gotten more into audio over the last couple of years. What are some of your favorite audios, just to put you on the spot?
I have to say one of my very favorite ones to listen to is Jordan Castillo-Price's Psychop series. am such a huge fan of those. I can't wait for the next one to come out on audio. And I mean, they're great to read, but the narrator also does Gomez Pierce is the narrator, and he does a really excellent job, and they are just so much fun. And those are ones, I don't know how many extra miles I've walked listening to those. So.
Yeah, usually I get stuck in the car. It's like, I have to get out of the car now, but we're at this best point right now.
You have a driveway moment, yeah.
So you mentioned that you submitted your 21st book today. You want to tell us a little bit about that and like what's coming up down the road from you and what you're working on now?
Sure. I'm at a point, it's almost a little bit frustrating. I have at this moment 4 complete novels that are all in various stages of having things done to them. So that one I just submitted. I've got another one also under submission. The one I just submitted is a contemporary about a guy who builds a library. So that's, I think, close to lots of people's hearts.
Okay, I already like this guy if he's building a library.
Well, he starts out, he's got too many books. He's got a bit of a problem. And if you could see slightly to my right, you would see that may be something I empathize with a little bit. So he builds like a little free library, one of the little neighborhood lending libraries. So that one I just submitted. I also have a noir private eye story set in a medieval fantasy setting that I have currently under submission. So that one's fun. I have coming out in November. I'll have with Dreamspun. I'll have a mafia vampires in Vegas story coming out that was really, really fun to write. And then next May, I'll have a contemporary coming out with the Dreamspun line, and that one is about a big city lawyer and a small town cook.
And I assume that the Vegas one is for Dreamspun Beyond, that
yeah,
newer
it's for the Beyond
paranormal line. Awesome.
Yeah. So which is, I love writing. Paranormal is one of my favorite genre. So it was a lot of fun, and it has, like I said, mafia vampires in Vegas. How could you not want that?
Absolutely. I mean, you've already got hipster architect werewolves, so
exactly. And I have to kind of give credit because the idea for that one came when Amy Lane and I were driving last year to the RT convention in Vegas, and we stopped for gas in Primm, which is just over the Nevada-California border, and there's like 3 casinos in the middle of the desert, and we were thinking that would be a really great place for lazy mobsters to store bodies, because you don't have to go very far to chuck them into the desert from there. So that's how I got that idea.
Nice. So what are you looking forward to at GRL this year?
This sounds a little bit trite, but the most fun for me is just the people. I mean, seeing my friends who I see maybe once a year, and I missed GRL last year, so some people I haven't seen for a couple of years, getting to meet new people, it is always so much fun. And, as authors, we spend a lot of time kind of closed up in our little spaces and inside our heads, so to be able to interact with actual live human beings is a lot of fun.
That is a good time, and you're right. Always getting to go back and see folks you see once a year is a treat for sure.
And I've met such wonderful friends at the previous GRLs. I mean, people that I keep in touch with now all the time, and that's for me. That's the best part of it.
Mm-hmm. Now I know you've got a giveaway for our listeners to go along with your appearance here. So what have you got for them?
I've got a couple of things. So the winner will get one of my self-published audiobooks, and it's a book called Flux, and Joel Leslie does the narration and does an amazing job of it. So it's a fantasy book. So they'll get a copy of that, and they'll also get a copy of the ebook version in format of their choice of my book Love is Heartless, which is a contemporary with a bit of a suspense backstory.
Very cool. That's going to be exciting for somebody to get for sure. And we'll offer that up the entire week that this podcast is out there.
Wonderful.
Now, what's the best way for people to keep up with you online and all of these books you've got coming out?
Probably the very best way is I've got a webpage. It's Kay Fielding Writes. And so that one has, I try to keep my blog up to date. One of the fun things I do there is I have a thing going called Interview Roulette, and I have a bunch of authors, usually once a week, come in, and I ask them random questions, and they have some really fun answers. So that's fun. But there's also a list of all my books and things I'm going to. But you can also catch me on Facebook, and it's all Kay Fielding Writes will get you to me at any of these. So Facebook, on Twitter, on Tumblr, if you want to see some of my vacation pictures from my trip. If you want to see the capital of Nebraska, its nickname is the penis of the plains. So if anybody wants to see why, they can see that. So they can see that. They can see Buffalo. We visited Devil's Tower. So that's all up on Tumblr.
Amazing. Well, we'll link up to all that stuff in our show notes for sure, so that people can check all that stuff out. I will certainly be going to the Tumblr to just check out all the pictures.
Wonderful.
From the flat travels that you had across the country. Well, Kim, thank you so much for spending a few minutes with us. We look forward to seeing you in Denver in a few months.
Thank you so much for interviewing me. It's been a joy.
The Big Gay Fiction Podcast is thrilled to once again partner with Gay Romlet as a featured blogger. You can see all the participating blogs and the full GRL Blog Tour schedule at gayromlet.com/2017 blog tour. Gay Romlet is an annual retreat that brings together the people who create and celebrate LGBT romance for a one-of-a-kind must-attend gathering of dynamic, informal, and diverse fun. Each year, the retreat travels to a new city and hosts tons of events, from raucous parties to mellow tete-a-tetes, while still maintaining a spirit of familiarity. GRL is the place to connect with old friends, find family you didn't know you had, and meet with both newly published and established authors in the gay romance genre. This year's retreat is set for October 19 through 22 in Denver, Colorado at the Denver Marriott Tech Center. For more information or to register, please visit gayromlet.com.
Want to hang out with us between shows? Check us out on Facebook. You never know what we might post. News about book sales, bonus video content, and maybe even a live broadcast or two. Like us today at facebook.com/Big Gay Fiction Podcast and see what we get up to next.
So thanks again to Kim for hanging out with us for a few minutes. Make sure you check the show notes page for the Rafflecopter so you can enter to win either the audiobook or the ebook that she's got.
Mm-hmm. Good stuff.
Good stuff indeed.
Okay. As I mentioned in last week's episode, this week is primarily going to be us talking about our whirlwind tour of New York City and all the shows that we saw, and we saw a whole bunch of them. So if you hate theater, which I can't imagine why anyone would.
Not listen to this show anyway.
Yeah, I know. You could probably fast forward to the very end. We got some more book content towards the end of this particular episode. But now is the time when we speak about the theater.
Indeed.
So we, last week, took a short drive down to San Francisco for the first leg of the Jeff and Will Theater Tour 2017.
I think it's the first time we've split it up into two different cities.
It might be. I think it might be, yeah. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
But it was worth it because show number one on the tour was the phenomenon of Hamilton. Never could see it in New York. Had to wait till it came on tour in San Francisco to actually get tickets to it. It was totally worth that 8 hours online waiting to get tickets. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It was exciting to see a show that, to me, lived up to every bit of its hype. Mm-hmm. Which, in my view, doesn't happen often enough. I could list off a number of shows that were like, oh my god, best thing ever. Then it's like, okay, I get it. I really get it with Hamilton. I was blown away.
Yeah. So for those of you who have been living under a rock, Hamilton is, of course, the story of Alexander Hamilton in sort of pop rap musical terms.
I thought it really encompassed it had pop and rap, but typical Broadway show tunes.
Exactly.
And it was a nice mishmash of genre and style.
Penned by the genius Lin-Manuel Miranda. Jeff and I have, whether on purpose or not, I don't really listen to a whole lot of music in general anyway. We have not listened to. We're like the two people in North America who have not downloaded this CD and listened to it 100,000 times. So we went into Hamilton completely fresh, not really knowing anything about the music or the structure of the show itself. Lin-Manuel was fascinated by the biography of Hamilton that came out a couple of years ago. I think the story is he was reading it on vacation for some light reading. And he was completely sucked in, and he thought this would make a damn good musical. And boy, did it ever. Like I said, it encompasses all different styles of music and really blends them in a really beautiful, unique way. I like you, I was completely blown away, and it 100% lives up to all of the hype. There's a reason why you can't get this ticket in New York, and probably won't be able to for many years to come. It's because it's really that damn good. First off, kudos to this touring cast. Every single one of them was utterly exceptional. I loved everyone.
Yes.
Everyone was fantastic. What else did I want to say? Oh, something that struck me while watching this show is that not only is all of the music, of course, exceptional, and all of the, the casting, everyone is really, really damn good. I think with the combination of the staging itself and the choreography by Andy Blankenbuehler, the show really is so intricately detailed, and the entire thing, from the beginning to the very end, it runs like a Swiss watch. There's not the music, there's not a single wasted word, and on stage, visually, there's not a single wasted movement anywhere during the 2 hours and 45 minutes. It is genuinely exceptional.
Yeah.
I really can't think of any other word to
I was going to mention the same thing kind of about the choreography and the staging. Often you feel like you could take a show away from its staging and just present it in a concert style, for example, just have the music kind of done. I can't imagine Hamilton without the movement and the choreography and that staging, because it all works so well together. And I mean, kudos to the creative team across the board for just making all that happen. And yeah, I'd love to see it again. I probably won't get to see it for another a decade or something until it starts to maybe dip out just a little bit. I really think our government would work a lot better if it had to all happen in rap battles.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that'd be a hoot.
Exactly. Okay. So after Hamilton, we hopped on an airplane. Deluxe fancy upgraded airplane, by the way.
It was the fanciest upgrade I've ever had in my life.
And we made our way to New York City. What was really actually very, very nice, and hopefully we will be able to repeat again on future trips, is that taking the first leg of our trip and starting our day in San Francisco meant we could take the earliest possible flight to the East Coast, which meant that we got there in the afternoon instead of wasting an entire day on an airplane and getting there in the late evening, which is how all of our New York trips usually go. Traveling from west to east is a pain in the butt because of the 3-hour difference. It kind of, sort of steals your entire day. So I was really happy that we got up first thing at the crack of dawn and started our flight. And we got there in the afternoon, which meant we could check into our hotel, we could relax a little bit. We walked down to the seaport and got our TKTS ticket for that evening, and we went and saw...
Ta-da! The Little Foxes, starring Cynthia Nixon, Laura Linney, Richard Thomas, and Michael McKean.
Yeah.
Amazing. I've never seen the movie, so how my husband, the Betty Davis fan, has never put this movie in front of me to see. But this was a great show in and of itself, and then you put Laura Linney and Cynthia Nixon at the heart of it, and it just gets elevated all that much more. Sadly, this show, if you haven't seen it, you're not going to, because it actually closes the day we're recording this on July 2nd after an extended limited engagement for the Manhattan Theater Club. I'm going to let you explain what it's about, because you're much better at these things, as I've often said on this show.
Okay, well, this particular production was a revival of the Lillian Hellman classic. I believe was made its debut probably in the 40s.
I would assume, yeah.
Super late 30s, probably early 40s. And the revival starred, as Jeff mentioned, Cynthia Nixon, Tony Award winner, and Laura Linney in the two main female roles. And what was really interesting about this particular production is that Cynthia and Laura swapped roles.
Every few days.
Every couple of days. Now, there have been productions in the past where the two male leads would swap every other evening. Was it...
American Buffalo, I believe, did that between... I can't even think of... John C. Reilly was half of that team that did it.
Oh, yeah.
I can't remember the other one.
I know which one you're talking about now. Yeah.
Might have been Philip Seymour Hoffman opposite him.
Possibly. So this kind of stunt casting is, quote-unquote, stunt casting is not exactly, new, but having two actresses of this caliber in this particular play doing the production... and this kind of format was new and interesting. They would play the two roles, the main role, Regina Giddens, and the secondary supporting female role of Aunt Bertie. And they would swap every couple of days. When we went and saw it, Cynthia was playing the lead, Regina Giddens, and Laura was playing the supporting role. Both of them, of course, were absolutely phenomenal. Really incredible. As Jeff said, I'm familiar with this particular property because of the Bette Davis movie. I've never actually seen the play or read the play itself, so this was a new experience for me as well. The movie sticks very closely to the original source material. It kind of edits it down a little bit for, a standard movie running time. But all of the elements from the play are in the movie, and I really enjoyed seeing the sort of expanded content of the original 3-act play. The play itself happens in the sort of post-Reconstructionist South, almost at the turn of the century, and it mainly focuses on a powerful Southern family and their attempt to bring in some Northern financing to build a cotton mill in their little hometown. And the three main members of this Southern family are putting up the money. Now, Regina Giddens is the sister of this rich and wealthy family, and in order to put in her share, she essentially has to get permission from her ailing husband. He's had heart problems, and he's been away, and so they have to convince him to come back to town so they can get the money, and this big financial deal can move forward. So it's really about sort of backroom dealings and weird Southern family dynamics and all sorts of melodrama and awesomeness. I think it's a really great play, really interesting play, and this particular production was exceptional.
Yeah, I loved it to bits. I really wish we could have gone back at some point and seen...
That would have been nice.
The flip-flop of the two actresses changing off on the roles. And frankly, I'd love to see the next act of this, because while the play does have an ending, what the family was doing was not over yet. It was just epically, backbiting like you've never seen it. I loved it. It made for a lovely evening. Yeah. So on Friday, we had an empty show slot. We had not pre-bought tickets to anything. And I went uptown early to try and get tickets to see Bette Midler in Hello, Dolly, because... that was sold out from the moment we tried to start booking this trip. What they do, however, is they sell, for any performance that's sold out, pretty much all of them that Bette's in, they sell standing room only tickets when the box office opens at 10 a.m. So I got in line about 9 o'clock, was sixth in line, hung out, listened to an audiobook. So that was enjoyable, having just some audiobook to listen to and finish up in my ear. And I was lucky enough to score 2 standing room tickets. So we're standing in the back of the house. behind the last row of the orchestra for a paltry $47. The people in front of us paid $199 for a seat. We're just right behind them for like $150 less. It was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
This was stunning. I've never seen Hello, Dolly, the film. I've never seen a production. It's old school vaudeville theater. Bette Midler, incredible, totally deserved her Tony Award. But her entire supporting cast, David Hyde Pierce, Gavin Creel, was it Kate Burton, I believe, also in that show?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Just extraordinary. It was 2.5 hours of just good old-fashioned fun and frivolity.
Yes, I don't think I need to explain to anyone what Hello, Dolly is about. You probably know what it is. Like Jeff, I've never been a particular fan of the movie, which is sacrilege, but I'm just not. And the only production of Hello, Dolly I've ever seen was a high school production.
Oh, wow.
That someone did like 25 years ago. So I remembered almost nothing about it. And I have to say, well, this was a pretty good reintroduction to the material. Good old-fashioned classic Jerry Herman score. Wonderful, funny book, and I just loved it. This was our first experience doing standing room. This is probably the only play we can imagine doing standing room for.
I would do standing room for Hamilton again.
That's a possibility. But standing room wasn't that bad, actually.
No.
Standing for 2.5 hours isn't that hard. I mean,
No.
not really.
And we did have a comfortable bar in front of us. There was the back wall of the orchestra that came up probably to
Shoulder-ish.
just about shoulder height for us. So we could, lean against this wall. We could put our head on this wall. I was never uncomfortable or fidgety too much. And especially with so much enthralling stagecraft happening in front of us.
Exactly. So, yay, thumbs up, Bette Midler and company.
Yeah, and try the SRO if you're in the New York area or going. At least we did it on a Friday morning. Like I said, I got there at 9, even though it was school's out, tourists are out. Not everybody knows about it, so that's an option if you're in the area and want to see it. I mean, I was out of the line by 10:30. So
yeah. Also worth noting that before we went to the show, Friday became our sort of designated bookstore day in New York. I'm very thankful that I have a husband who takes me to bookstores and shows while I'm on vacation. That's all I really need to be happy.
That's all I need, too.
So, yeah, we ran around most of Lower Manhattan, and we went to...
Well, I drug you to Upper Manhattan, at least Midtown Manhattan.
Well, it's more, Midtown,
to his least favorite place to go, which is Columbus Circle.
Blech.
But we did check out the Amazon store that's in the Time Warner Center.
Yes, we checked out the Amazon store. We checked out the Bureau.
The Bureau of Queer Services General Division.
At the center on 14th Street.
Where we also got to see an NYPD car that was decked out for Pride.
Yay.
Kudos to the NYPD for celebrating Pride in such a large fashion. We saw one of their vehicles that was all rainbow painted for the season. And we also, the few minutes we were actually at the Pride Parade on Sunday, we saw the NYPD contingent marching by.
Yeah, pretty awesome.
We also hit just a Barnes & Noble.
Yes, we did. We peeked into Barnes & Noble and bought some toys.
Yes, we didn't buy books at Barnes & Noble, but we bought toys.
Because you buy toys at Barnes & Noble, that's what you do. Okay, so moving back to theater.
Saturday afternoon. We saw the other Tony-winning musical. Hello, Dolly, of course, won the Tony this year for Best Revival. Dear Evan Hansen most justifiably won the Tony for Best Musical of the Year. Another show that, to me, lived up to every bit of its hype and was just tremendous.
Had you downloaded the album before we left?
No.
Okay.
And to actually clarify for Hamilton, too, for both Evan Hansen and Hamilton, most of my, other than just hearing about the show, was mostly based off of Tony Award performances. So Hamilton did the kind of medley in the 2016 awards, and then Dear Evan Hansen did Waving Through the Window for its performance, and that was really it. Other than and kind of knowing the stories themselves, I'd stayed away from it so I could kind of come at it fresh and not knowing the lyrics already and everything. This show was really extraordinary in so many ways. It's a very modern musical. It really takes a look at the modern issues of being a teenager, of not feeling like you belong, being cut off from society because there's so much social media that it's easy just to kind of look at everything happening rather than participating in it. A complex story. I think it's one of the most complex emotional stories that I've seen on Broadway since Next to Normal, several seasons ago. Ben Platt was over the top, just extraordinary. I don't know how he performs this show 8 times a week without kind of short-circuiting a little bit, because he goes through so many heavy emotional moments in this show. Trying to figure out how to say what it's kind of about without giving too much of it away.
Well, it is a Pasek and Paul show.
Yes.
And quite like Next to Normal. It deals with kind of fucked up family dynamics.
That's a good way to put it.
They really like digging into modern family dynamics and really digging in and examining it in all of its messiness. Modern messiness. That's what they're into. And that's sort of what Evan Hansen is about. The main character, played by Ben Platt, is sort of a nobody. He gets passed over by pretty much everybody. He's sort of non-existent, and a student at his school commits suicide, and people mistakenly believe that he was his best friend, and he starts receiving a lot of attention because of this. And he tries to deal with it in an honest way, and he tries to deal with it in a way that best supports the people around him and hopefully makes them feel better. But in his attempts to do so, he fucks everything up, and things keep getting worse and worse. It's really exceptional, really interesting, and Ben Platt is phenomenal.
Yeah, we were buying merchandise, such as the shirt that I'm seeing you're seeing on me in this moment. If you're watching the video, the merchandise booth was set up at the back of the orchestra of the theater, and as we're standing there buying this merchandise, he actually, with the help of security, left the theater incognito, baseball hat, sunglasses, the whole 9 yards. And we're just like, that was Ben Platt that just went by. Justifiably so, because this was after the matinee, meaning he had about 4 hours to recharge his batteries to do it all over again.
Yeah.
And so I hope he finds a quiet place to kind of chill for those hours and recharge. If you get the chance to see this show with him in it in particular, give it a go. And congratulations to Pasek and Paul for getting the Tony this year. Which means now they've got a Tony and an Oscar, and if they can get a Grammy and an Emmy, well, they get that EGOT.
Yep.
So, fingers crossed.
Okay, what's next?
Saturday evening, because we did see a show in every available slot that was possible.
Exactly.
We bypassed no opportunity to sit in a theater. We went to the all-new Groundhog Day, the musical, which is based on the film of the same name. It's exactly what you think it is. Where the man goes to wherever in Pennsylvania that is,
yes.
Puxatawny. And to cover the Groundhog Day, and he keeps reliving that day over and over and over and over and over and over and over again until he finally gets it right.
Yeah.
We went to this. Well, I went to this. I'd never seen the movie because it's not my kind of film, but I went because the lead actor is Andy Karl, and we love Andy Karl, and have since we saw him back in Legally Blonde. I think might have been our first Andy Karl.
Yeah,
million years ago.
He was absolutely exceptional in Rocky.
Yes.
Which sounds ridiculous to say. I know. Trust me. I do understand your incredulity. But he was remarkable. Rocky was a really interesting show. And he was amazing. He's also really damn good in this one, too.
Yeah. Got to sit through one of the very few technical stops that we've ever seen in a show. Despite the fact that the show's been open for a couple months now, they actually had some scenic issues, and they had to bring a stop to the show late in Act 1. Which for me was a turning point in the show, because I thought they spent a little too much time on the setup that, yes, he is stuck in this moment. Oh my God, it's horrible. And I was ready to move on from that. And thankfully, after this incident that stopped the show for a moment, the show really picked up and took off for me in Act 2.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you make a valid point. They do take a bit of time with the setup. Phil, the main character, is a dick. Several of the characters in the show say this outright. And while it takes a while for him to get to Puxatawny, deal with Groundhog Day, realize that he's reliving the same day over and over again, and at late in the first act, he realizes that this is a unique opportunity. To live out various scenarios in ways that he never could before. So the show, we were kind of meh at the very, very beginning, but once Phil has his realization, it gets a whole lot better, and we really, really enjoyed the show. Kudos to the design team, well, actually the entire production team, because they take a very difficult concept and execute it nearly flawlessly. The simple fact that he's reliving the same day over and over several times could lead to some genuinely boring repetition, but the show escapes that with some very deft scripting and very deft staging. It's a remarkably staged show. Beautifully designed. There is a hilarious sequence at the beginning of Act 2 where Phil is very despondent about having to relive this day over and over again. So he kills himself several times in a row during the course of a particular song, and he's reborn again in the same bed every single morning. And the way they pull this off is pretty remarkable. Yeah. Really, really lovely and well done. The staging utilizes a turntable, which is really nothing new in Broadway.
Les Mis kind of kicked that off for us back in the day.
Whole bunch of other shows that we saw, even Hello Dolly and Hamilton, of course, all used turntables. This one was particularly unique in that there was a main stage giant round table that's used throughout the production, but there were also several smaller turntables within the larger turntable. They utilize this brilliantly in the sequence where Andy and some drunken friends from the bar go for a joyride, and there's a police chase.
It's hilarious and so amazingly staged.
A police chase through this small town. Also, they used the turntable in Act 2 to recreate a tilt-o-whirl very convincingly on a Broadway stage. So not only is the show really funny and very charming, it's really well staged. So
yeah, I was particularly pleased and intrigued with the staging, where how they get him back to that bed sometimes. It's like
to start the day over.
It's like, wait, he was just over there. How is he over here?
Yeah.
And I know it was him because he was talking, and yet he's back over here now. It happened like 4 or 5 times, and there's only once where I clearly saw how the transition happened, and it was just brilliant.
Yeah.
So next up on Sunday afternoon, I spent my birthday, because Sunday the 25th was my birthday. We spent it with Glenn Close and her closing performance of the limited engagement of Sunset Boulevard.
Sunset Boulevard.
See, never got to play music rights for that. This is my at least second time to see Glenn, because I'm a little fuzzy if I saw her do this on Broadway, because I saw her 20-something years ago do this in Los Angeles in the North American premiere production of it. And I've seen it with Betty Buckley, and we've both seen it together with Elaine Page on Broadway. This is my favorite production of it. The stripped down, where the whole set is scaffolding. You've got a 40-piece orchestra, which was so just amazing to hear, because while you hear live music all the time on Broadway, the orchestras are never this big. Not even for something like Hello, Dolly do they come close to a 40-piece orchestra anymore. Glenn Close, I think, plays this role better than ever. She certainly sings it better than ever. She's very public knowledge that she learned how to sing to do this role 20 years ago, and she sings it better now than she ever did then. Mm-hmm. I was captivated. I loved that it was stripped down and there was none of this mansion dropping from the fly space of the theater and all these elaborate movie sets. It was all done on a scaffolding. It was all very stripped down, bare bones, prop pieces. It was a sumptuous afternoon. Mm-hmm. And then you get to the end and sumptuous, yes. We actually got to see Andrew Lloyd Webber because he brought her flowers out on the stage for the closing, which is pretty awesome.
Mm-hmm. So for those of you who don't know what Sunset Boulevard is, it is Andrew Lloyd Webber's musicalization of the 1950s sort of noir melodrama about essentially washed up silent movie star and her attempt essentially at a comeback. It's a return. Anyway, the movie is pure genius, and I have always really enjoyed this particular show. I think it is Andrew Lloyd Webber's most lush and cinematic score, and as Jeff mentioned, it was a genuine treat to hear it with a full 40-piece orchestra. This particular production, this revival, was considered stripped down, but that by no means it was small.
No.
With their ginormous orchestra and complex multi-level set, it's still very big. They still had a huge cast, and they didn't scrimp on anything. It was just sort of a different interpretation, I would say, of the material.
I think you only consider it stripped down if you go from here's a mansion dropping from the rafters of the theater.
I know, it's crazy.
To scaffolding and stairs.
I know, yeah. Needless to say, Glenn was remarkable, truly wonderful. We've had several different versions of the cast albums over the years. There have been many different recordings of Sunset Boulevard. Yeah. The most complete, I believe, was Glenn's version, the U.S. Broadway CD.
There's yes and no. Hers is the most correct recording of the current staging.
That's true.
The Patti LuPone London version does have material that didn't make it to the States.
Yes.
And then there are stripped down versions. There's a Canadian one disc version with Diane Carroll,
yes,
which is really good.
It's really, really good.
And then Betty Buckley did essentially a sampler CD of the big Norma songs.
Key Norma songs from when she was.
And I have them all.
So yes, I agree with Jeff. I've loved the original recording. I've never seen Glenn do the show before. And to get to see her to do it live, real and in person, was a definite treat. I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, so it was just remarkable.
Awesome.
Saturday evening, because we walked out of Sunset Boulevard, it's like, should we see something else?
Of course we should. And what a stupid question.
Well, for a while we thought we were going to chill.
Yeah.
Because there's just a handful of things available to see on a Sunday evening in New York, which is typically when a lot of the shows are dark.
Yeah.
I talked Will into going back to see Cats. Meow. Because, it was just September that I talked about seeing it on this show when the revival was early in its run back in New York. And it's still magical to me. I love seeing Ricky Ubdea again play Mr. Mistopheles. And it's got even more So You Think You Dance people in it now because Jacob Carr's in it, which was very cool to see. And I loved it. Now, the big question is, you who have always pretty much hated Cats, and have only seen it once, right before it left the Winter Garden back in the 2000s. What did you think of your return visit?
Yes. While I adore Andrew's Sunset Boulevard, Cats is definitely not my favorite. So we'll just leave it at that. I was not enchanted by the original production, but I had a rough idea of what I was getting myself in for by going back. Jeff loves it. It was his birthday. I kind of humored him.
He did.
And I actually kind of had fun. I think I understand dance a little bit more than when I saw this, over 15 years ago. That's originally. Fair. Yeah. So I was able to enjoy that aspect a little bit more. I'm still not crazy about the show itself. I mean, it has the barest whisper of a plot, and it's essentially, 3 big songs, and then they get reprised over and over again. So
until the kitty goes to heaven.
Until the kitty goes to heaven in a tire. So I'm not crazy about the show, but I did actually think this was a really well put together production. I actually thought Andy Blankenbuehler, bringing his name up once again, he did the choreography this time around. I'm not sure what his credit actually reads, if it wasn't inspired by the original.
I think that's the idea, yeah.
Andy's new choreography is still very true to the original 80s choreography by Gillian Lan, I believe. It sort of sands down that very 80s Cats feel.
Okay.
It's not as, plie, head pop, jazz hands kind of 80s-ness. I mean, it's still very much Cats. That's unmistakable, but I think he kind of softened the dated quality that it has had in the past. So while this production isn't, completely reimagined, I think...
No, not by a long shot.
I think it's, what's the word? A solid production for a new generation.
A brushed
up revival. How's that for a...
That's a good tagline.
A good tagline or a blurb, yeah. I enjoyed it. It was pretty darn good.
See, he didn't roll his eyes the entire time he was sitting there.
I did not.
For the show. So we capped off on Monday with a trip to the Metropolitan Opera House to see American Ballet Theatre at its premiere production for this season called Whipped Cream. Mm-hmm. Probably the strangest production we've ever seen at American Ballet Theatre.
That is true.
Takes place in a candy shop as the boy has a little too much whipped cream and has to go off to the hospital because his tummy got upset. In Act 1, you basically see the candy shop come to life and have some whimsy with that. In Act 2 that we're primarily at the doctor's office? No, we're still in the Candyland in Act 2. Mm-hmm. For some more whimsicalness going on there. And those parts of the show actually made me think of the Nutcracker and some of the stuff that goes on in a show like that. Mm-hmm. And then the third act is a little dark as we see some of the goings on in the hospital before the boy is whisked away to live a magical life over in Candyland. Mm-hmm. A little bit like Cats. Boy has too much whipped cream, goes off to candy heaven.
Something like that.
I didn't really say that ABT. I'm sorry.
Like Jeff said, there are a lot of similarities to the Nutcracker. It is sort of a fantasy ballet with themes that children would enjoy. This production was choreographed by Alexei Radomatsky. He's sort of their...
I think he's their artistic director and guest artistic director or something.
Yeah, he's the guy who does all of their new work. He usually premieres a new ballet every season, and this was 2017's. Mm-hmm. The music was by Strauss. Sort of, not forgotten, but I don't know what other word to use, not frequently heard.
There you go. Underappreciated, perhaps?
Maybe an underappreciated libretto by Strauss. What made this ballet so strange and fantastical was the production and costume design by I'm looking at trying to find his names. Mark Ryden, by pop artist Mark Ryden. If you saw his work, you would probably recognize it. It's really beautifully strange. Try to imagine if, let's see, how can I describe him? So imagine if Tim Burton worked in sort of 60s pop palette with pink and blue pastels.
Okay.
With really weird, fantastical creatures thrown in, and that's what it sort of reminded me of. So, yeah.
Okay, I can see that. We had an excellent cast for this evening. Misty Copeland was on deck. Corey Stearns. Jeffrey Ciro was the boy. It was whimsically, and I enjoyed it, and it was kind of fun to see something not in their usual repertoire for us, because usually we see some of their classic pieces, the Romeo and Juliets, the Swan Lakes, the Giselles, the Onegins, and that sort of thing, and this was like just completely different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Weird, wonderful night at the ballet.
Indeed. Wrapped up our trip pretty well, because early the next morning we were back on a plane.
Mm-hmm. And we made it home.
Safe
sound.
And here we are. Now we've told you all about it. So heading back to the books, now that we've done something totally different for the last 30 minutes or so, we do have Brandilyn with us to talk about an ebook that she's got recommendations for this summer. So I'm pleased to welcome back Brandilyn to the podcast. How's it going?
It's going. It's been a while.
It has been, yeah. We've had a little gap with RT and everything going on. Had a gap getting some of our favorite contributors back.
Yeah.
So
that's because you've been popular and busy and stuff. It's all good.
What have you got for a summertime reading recommendation for our listeners?
Well, it's a reading/listening recommendation because, me, audiobooks, all that. It is called The Game Changer, and it is by Kay Simone. The audio is read by the incomparable Greg Tremblay. So, yeah, that man could read me the phone book, and he is honestly the reason I picked this one up, because I needed a new Greg Tremblay book to listen to. And the book really surprised me. It's Out for You. One of the it's a football player and a physical therapist. I am not a sports romance person, so I'm not like, oh, it's a football player, you must read it. I was actually leery of it because it was a sports romance, but the football player is not a douche, which is always a plus, and it's not insta-love, it is not insta-happy. They work for their happily ever after. They work very hard. They make stupid mistakes. They have stupid things happen to them. They have bad, but it's not a tearjerker. So it's a great beach read. If you're driving on vacation, it's a great listen if you don't have small children, because it's, still a gay romance. And yeah, so The Game Changer by Kay Simone. Pick it up. Listen to it. It's way better than the phone book.
I love what you said about Greg. I think it's awesome that we're seeing the narrators in our genre, Greg and Joel and Derek and some others, where people will buy their books because of who's narrating it, not necessarily because of who's writing it.
Yeah. Well, and absolutely, especially the three you mentioned, they have a following. They have their own following, and the three of them, Joel, Derek, and Greg, they're all fabulous individuals, having had the pleasure of meeting all of them, but they all have very different voices, and they bring something very different to each story. And there are stories that I read in ebook years ago and thought were okay. And then I listened to one of their audios and was absolutely blown away. One of them that comes to mind is another Greg Tremblay book, The Servant by Mary Comey. I picked it up because it was Greg. I like the story. I like Mary Comey, but it wasn't my favorite. And I've now listened to it 10 times because he just absolutely nailed it and blew me away. So if you haven't tried audiobooks, I love them. I know you listen.
Yes.
And I know Will listens. But, yeah. So, yeah. Try The Game Changer by Kay Simone, narrated by Greg Tremblay. But, hey, if you don't want the audiobook, I believe it's in KU, but I'm not positive. But I think it is, if I remember correctly. So
we will link up to both versions of the book, and we'll link up to Mary's book as well, and Greg's audio library on Audible, so people can go check him out too.
Absolutely.
All right, Brandilyn. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us for a few minutes, and we'll try to get you on in a quicker fashion going forward, because we like having you on.
Can a backstage flirtation lead to real-life romance? That's the question in Love's Opening Night, the gay romance novella by Jeff Adams. Jeremy Steele is a veteran Broadway performer. For his latest role, he's dancing alongside a man he's fantasized about for years, TV star Ty Beaumont. Jeremy knows better than to get involved with a castmate, but when Ty has trouble learning the complicated choreography, Jeremy offers to lend a hand. When a rehearsal kiss turns into something more, Jeremy can't help but wonder what a celebrity like Ty could ever see in a Broadway chorus boy like him. Will a relationship with his crush make it past previews? Or can it become a long-running hit? Love's Opening Night by Jeff Adams is available at dreamspinnerpress.com, amazon.com, and other ebook retailers. Pick up yours now.
So that's going to do it for this week, because we've talked your ear off now for over an hour. Kim Fielding, don't forget, she's got a rafflecopter on this week's show notes page for the chance to win both an ebook and an audiobook. So get there before this Sunday and get your entries to win.
Coming up next week in episode number 92, Kat Sebastian is here to join us, and she's going to talk about her historical romances, including the newly released Ruin of a Rake.
So yeah, really looking forward to talking to her.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's episode. Until next time, guys, keep reading.
For detailed show notes and the complete episode backlist, go to biggayfictionpodcast.com. New episodes are available every Monday on all major podcast distributors and YouTube. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.